Burner account, as I'm paranoid. For background, I, a 28-year-old female, have been working for a bank as a processor for the last 10 years, and while I know I'm lucky to have my job, my working pattern is good, and I have the option to work from home, the job itself is boring and can be stressful, and it's not what I want to do with my life. I could never decide what I wanted to do when I was younger, and instead of going to college, I decided to work and gain experience for maybe a year or so until I could make my mind up before returning to higher education. But I got too used to making money and never did. Fast forward 10 years and I've come to the conclusion that what I would like to do is write books full-time. I have been writing and self-publishing for a few years now. However, I would like to be able to dedicate more time to it, but up until now, that's never been an option. My husband was promoted almost 2 years ago now and is literally doing his dream job. He makes far more than I do, but not quite enough to completely support us just yet. But recently he took me aside and said he knew I wasn't happy in my job, and it was hurting him to see. He suggested that instead of working a 40-hour week, I reduce my hours and maybe do 25 instead, as we can easily afford it. I was completely over the moon at the suggestion and agreed. Work we're also happy to accommodate due to my length of service. My sister, on the other hand, was not so happy about my decision. My sister and her husband both work full-time hours and have 2 young children. My sister has accused me of being lazy and saying that I shouldn't be taking less hours unless I have children, in order to do something that's just a hobby. She says that even she has to work full-time in order to raise her children, and that me not feeling like working isn't an excuse to sit around the house and do nothing all day, while my husband is out making money. I've told her that I've worked non-stop since I was 18 years old and now finally know what I want to do with my life, which got me the response that if I took more initiative to find out before now, I could have been doing what I love professionally for years instead of just starting out. This is where I think I might have been an asshole, but I basically told my sister that while I could sympathize with the fact she has a lot on her plate, it's not my fault that she has children and I don't. At this point, she raged at me, saying I'm clearly too irresponsible to understand the sacrifice and dedication it takes to have 1 child, never mind 2, and that if I want to be a part-time worker and write silly love stories, then I can go do that. I've spoken to my parents, and while they don't think I'm in the wrong, they say I should be more understanding of why me and my husband being in a better financial position is a sore spot. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I'm honestly overwhelmed by the response this has gotten, and incredibly appreciative of everybody's support, so thank you all for your input. I'm feeling a lot better about things now, and less angry overall as a result. A slight update, I received a call from my sister's husband about an hour ago. For context, the argument with my sister happened on Tuesday, not Wednesday. He said that he'd noticed my sister had been off for a few days but wouldn't tell him what was wrong, but finally caved today. He made it clear on the phone call that he doesn't agree one bit with what my sister said to me, and that he's told her she needs to apologize for being cruel and judgmental over what was supposed to be good news in my life. He didn't elaborate, but hinted that there was more to why my sister reacted the way she did, and that he'd come over tomorrow with my sister so we can talk. Hopefully we can sort things out, because I love my sister, and ultimately want her to be as happy as I am in my life. Relevant comments. Commenter Yin1. You are an independent married woman. Why are you seeking approval from your birth family for your marital and life choices? Original poster replied, I honestly didn't think it would be a big deal when I told them. It was more of a, here is what's going on in my life. And this is what I was met with, unfortunately. Commenter 2, not the a-hole. But is your sister in healthcare or retail? Something feels familiar about that sentiment. Original poster replied, dental assistant, so somewhat healthcare. Commenter 3, it depends on your tone. Were you a matter of fact or matching her energy? You should be shutting down your younger sister immediately when she attacks you for sharing things happening in your life. Rage is not a typical sibling response to jealousy, but you don't seem surprised by her reaction. You should be. I assume from your parents? What did you expect? Type response, and that you waited longer than needed to say anything? She is trained to receive no consequences or reaction to tantrums and rage. If that's the case, what took you so long? Original poster replied, I would like to think I was being matter of fact, but honestly I was probably more just over her being in lecture mode by the time I said what I did. It was on the same day I responded this way. She'd come over for a visit and chat, and for the most part, we get on quite well generally. I wasn't surprised she wasn't totally supportive, but her reasoning for not being supportive baffled me. I had once said jokingly before that I'd love to be able to quit my job, and here's hoping one day my husband would be able to earn enough money for the both of us. At no point did I ever think this could ever be the case, but even then my sister said that wouldn't be a good idea. Though her reasoning at the time was, what if we ever got divorced? How would I support myself? Update. My sister and her husband came by today as promised. They actually came over much earlier than I was anticipating and left a couple of hours ago, so I don't know if I managed to say everything I probably should have at the time. But here's the gist for those of you who wanted to know. It didn't take a genius to see that my sister wasn't doing too well. She normally takes pride in her appearance and how she dresses, while I'm usually the one to prioritize sleep over putting on a full face of makeup. But when she turned up this morning, she looked as if she hadn't slept in days. She had no makeup on and she was just wearing some loungewear. Not overly important details, except that she didn't look like my sister at all. She immediately apologized as soon as she walked into the living room and hugged me before I could say anything. I hugged her back because she's my little sister and no matter what, I love her to death. It also occurred to me that it felt as if she's lost a ton of weight, and while she's always been slim, this worried me a bit. And any residual annoyance I might have felt dwindled quite quickly. A lot of you guessed that my sister is pregnant with baby number 3. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this turned out not to be the case. As it turns out, my 4-year-old nephew, her eldest son, has been diagnosed with autism and has been having some major behavioral problems as of late. He's always been a rambunctious kid and prone to a tantrum, but I put this down to him being a child and didn't think too much of it. Apparently, he's been having huge meltdowns at nursery school, leading to him being violent with other kids and members of staff. And it's led to my sister having to leave early from work on very short notice, and has had to call in sick several times when he's in a bad way. Due to this, she's been called into a disciplinary meeting which might lead to a formal hearing, and it's really worrying her. She's also incredibly worried about what her son's life is going to look like, and how much support he'll need moving forward. Her husband is there for her, of course, but he works a job where he needs to drive hours away at a time, so isn't always at home in the mornings when things are at their worst. His mother lives alone in another part of the country, and our parents aren't able to do a whole lot of babysitting as our mother still works and our dad has bad problems with his back. She acknowledges that her behavior was totally uncalled for, but that hearing about me being in a position to be able to cut my hours when she's worrying about even having a job in a couple of weeks really triggered her, and that she's been on medication for her mood for several weeks now as it is. I told her that of course I understood how her position could be stressful and upsetting, but if she had trusted me with this info and confided in me as a sister, of course I would have been there for her in any way I could have. Her husband cut in at this point and assured me that they were both incredibly grateful for every time I and my own husband had helped them out over the years, and he didn't want this to be something that caused our families to drift apart. My sister agreed, and again she acknowledged her mistake and admitted that she feels like recently things have been really difficult for her while my life seems to be falling into place. She said that even when I was at my lowest, I still did everything with an air of confidence that she has always lacked, and that even when I didn't know where my life was going, I always held my head high and saw the positives. Something she is really struggling to do right now. She also told me that she told our parents about speaking to a doctor and being on medication for depression, but had asked them not to say anything to anyone, which is probably why they wanted me to go easy on her. Overall, I'm not mad anymore, and I know that deep down my sister is happy for me. She's just in an uncertain situation right now, and it got the best of her. Get it. Thank you all for the incredible suggestions and sources of support that may be able to help my sister and my nephew. This is still all very new, not just to me, but for them too. And no doubt we'll all be spending a very long time looking into the best options and seeing what is best going forward. I may not be the best when it comes to childcare, but if there's one thing my job has taught me this last decade, it's how to get as many details and as much info as possible. So no doubt I'll be putting that skill to good use very shortly. Top comments. Commenter. 1. I'm sorry she's having a hard time. To be honest, I still feel like they are trying to talk you into babysitters her son. Helping your sister is important, but if they ask this, please think about what your means for your dream. Original poster responded, "Trust me, I've been very clear about this with them. And honestly, as much as I love my nephews, I've never been a go-to for babysitting. In general, they know my tolerance for kids is very low at the best of times, and considering my eldest nephew's additional needs, I think we all know that would be a massive disaster waiting to happen. Commenter 2. I'm glad she was able to apologize to you. Her being stressed doesn't make it okay for her to take that out on you. You can do whatever you want with your time. It's not up to her. Also, I'm just curious, is it always your sister that has to take care of the kid and miss work? Being default parent is super stressful, and it seems like her husband doesn't take time off to help when the kid's having issues. He's a parent too, it shouldn't be on her every single time. Original poster responded. From what I understand, it hasn't been out of choice. It's more that whenever there's been a call about my nephew needing to be picked up early from nursery, because he's in the middle of meltdown and no one can get him out of it, she's the one close enough to be able to do it, as her husband can sometimes be literal hours away. Plus, a lot of the time, he has to be out early in the morning so he can be back at a decent time in the early evening. And it just so happens that mornings can be difficult if the little guy isn't feeling it. This is all still very new for them, and they know changes need to be made and options looked into to make things easier. Commenter 3. Your poor sister. She seems truly remorseful. No one is truly prepared for a child with special needs, and having to work full-time on top of that is incredibly hard. And let's be honest, life is easier without kids. Losing your job has a different meaning when you have kids who completely depend on you. I would look into all the programs in your area that help with special needs, and I know where I live, special needs kids can start public school at age 3, where they can get the help they need. I really hope things work out for your sister in the long run.
Relevant background information. My husband has a condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, which makes his bones very fragile and susceptible to fractures. He uses a wheelchair because his bones are too weak to support his body weight. This past weekend, we attended a friend's wedding. There was again relevant info. A fairly heavy young woman at our table who was drinking heavily and was flirting very aggressively with my husband throughout the evening. I found out later that she's a cousin of the bride. He was very polite, but eventually started rebuffing her with decreasingly gentle hints and told her that he was gay and that his husband was sitting right next to him. A bit later, some tables were cleared and dancing began, which led us to believe that we were off the hook. The woman who had been bothering us was dancing with another guy, so we sat at the edge of the improvised dance floor and watched. After a while, however, she had disentangled from her dance partner and was dancing near us with a couple of female friends. Right as a song was ending, she leaned backward in an attempted flourish of sorts and tripped and ended up right in my husband's lap. As I mentioned earlier, his bones are not up to supporting an approximate 200 pounds weight suddenly dropping on him, and she ended up breaking both of his femurs and one of his ribs. It was a disaster. We had to call an ambulance. He needed surgery on his right leg. He had to stay in the hospital for 4 nights, and he's going to be stuck in bed for a good long while. We do have decent health insurance, but it's looking like we can expect to pay approximately $3,000 out of pocket for the health care he received. Honestly, we don't have that kind of money lying around. Our friend who got married has been in touch and was extremely apologetic about the situation. He and his new wife were absolutely not at fault, and I'd like to drag them through the mud as little as possible. I am, however, wondering if it is possible to sue the cousin at fault for the medical bills we now owe. After an evening of aggressive flirting, I frankly don't believe that she came over to us and then happened to fall exactly in my husband's lap purely by accident, but I don't have any proof that it was intentional. I'm certain that she didn't have any malicious intent, and that she had no idea that she was going to hurt him so badly by plopping herself on him the way she did. Even if it was purely a drunken stumble, does she bear any liability for the injuries she caused, even if they were unintentional? Neither of us have contacted her at all since the wedding. We'd never met beforehand, and I don't know quite how to casually ask a stranger for thousands of dollars. Based on her behavior at the wedding, the actions above, plus the fact that she peaced out as soon as it became apparent that she'd really hurt my husband, and she didn't get in touch again. I suspect that she's not going to be super willing to pitch in for medical expenses. Do we have any kind of case against her? Is it worth hiring a lawyer? Or is that just going to add to the pit of debt that this wedding has put us into? Relevant comments. Somebody said, most wedding venues will require the purchase of wedding insurance, which could cover the costs of injuries to guests. I would ask the bride and groom to see if they have a policy and if it would cover injuries. If there is coverage, then the insurance company may either cover the medical expenses or the attorney fees to sue the cousin. Original poster replied, "That's a great point and not something I'd thought of. I'll ask the groom about it, but probably won't get a definitive answer until they get back from their honeymoon after the new year." Another commenter. You can also ask the venue if they require the insurance, then you get the quick answer. With the venue, my wedding was held at, we couldn't finalize everything until I had the insurance purchased and sent them a copy. This way, at least you know if the bride and groom should have it. The eggshell rule, also thin skull rule, papier-mâché plaintiff rule, or talem qualem rule. 1. Is a well-established legal doctrine in common law, used in some tort law systems. 2. With a similar doctrine applicable to criminal law. The rule states that, in a tort case, the unexpected frailty of the injured person is not a valid defense to the seriousness of any injury caused to them. Basically, the fact she didn't know he had brittle bones isn't a defense for the woman who broke them. She still broke them. Original poster replied, "Thanks, this is useful to know. I do think it would be really hard to prove that she did it intentionally, since the whole thing was set up to look like an accident from the start. And who knows, maybe she really did trip and just happened to land directly on him. A principle of law called eggshell plaintiff. Sorry. Lol. I might have a new nickname for him. Somebody said, if she did it on purpose, that's battery. If she did it by accident, that's negligence. Both are equally valid things to sue for. In fact, you could possibly sue on both theories at the same time. It might change your strategy, but something being an accident doesn't mean it's not her fault." Mandatory disclaimer. I am a lawyer, but I'm not a personal injury lawyer, a Minnesota lawyer, or your lawyer, and this is just me spitballing, not giving you advice. Update. My husband got in touch with a personal injury lawyer shortly after I made the original post, and he said that she echoed a lot of the advice we saw on here. Shout out to you, Law Geek, for introducing me to the term eggshell plaintiff, which was apparently the phrase of the hour when they talked. She said that he would almost certainly win a case against the drunk cousin, possibly for quite a substantial payout once lost wages and pain and suffering were taken into account. She added, however, that recovery could be a real issue and the suit might not be worth pursuing if we didn't think the cousin would actually pay up. She said that he also could have a case under Minnesota's dram shop law against the bride and groom, or more likely the bartending service they hired. But he'd likely get a much smaller settlement because of comparative fault laws. I got the name of the bartending service, and they definitely have liquor liability coverage. I learned from the groom that the cousin is a bit of a train wreck in terms of fiscal responsibility, and that she's quite unlikely to be willing or able to pay any kind of settlement. So for now, my husband's lawyer is helping him figure out how to bring a case against the bartenders. As I mentioned, it's unlikely that we'd get the full settlement, especially if he settles out of court, which I think he'd like to do if possible. But that's completely fine because the numbers she was citing were crazy high once pain and suffering, etc., were brought into play. Even a quite small fraction, if we were able to recover it, would help a lot. As an aside, the drunk cousin apparently found out that we were considering suing her because she found my husband on Facebook and sent him a rather incoherent message about how the whole situation wasn't her fault because she couldn't have known he had OI and in fact was his fault for not telling her. I guess she thinks he should just wear a sign at all times that says, "I have brittle bones, please do not sit on me." I thought he should reply, "Eggshell plaintiff, bitch," but maturity won out at the end of the day and he didn't respond at all. Otherwise, his fractures are healing well, which is a huge relief, and he's a lot more comfortable than he was the last time I posted. It's a little bit of a bummer that the cousin isn't going to be held accountable for her actions, but at least it's looking likely that we won't be on the hook for the bills we had to pay. Thanks again for the help. Relevant comments. Is the lawyer aware of the Facebook messages? Yes, my husband brought it up the last time they spoke. This is secondhand. I didn't speak to her myself, so I might be mixing up some details, but my impression is that it doesn't matter all that much. Whether or not it was intentional, he has a valid tort against her. If it was unintentional, it would be negligence. If it's intentional, it would be something else. If he decided to sue her, it would probably be a relevant piece of evidence. But it still doesn't solve the problem that she's very unlikely to pay whatever the court decides she owes him. Is the cousin telling the truth about not being able to pay the judgment? I don't have any proof beyond what the groom said, but he's a very close friend, and I really don't think he'd lie about it. Also, he and the bride did offer to cover half of my husband's medical expenses themselves, which was very kind, but we didn't feel comfortable accepting, especially after they'd just spent most of their savings on their wedding and honeymoon. The cousin herself doesn't have any assets beyond her car, which I can't imagine is worth much. I believe her parents are middle class/lower middle class, so there's a good chance that they'd just end up paying whatever they could from their retirement savings or something. But that also seems pretty shitty and unfair. Can one of the insured parties sue the cousin? Due to comparative fault laws in Minnesota, I think the answer is no. If we sued the bartenders and the court found them liable, they'd only have to pay the percent of the total damages they're liable for. So if they were 20% responsible and the cousin was 80% responsible, they'd only have to pay 20% of total damages. Final update. Now that things have settled down a little, I thought I'd provide an update to my previous posts, original, and update about the most unpleasant wedding I've ever attended. Long story short, we didn't end up suing anyone. The woman who was responsible was unlikely to be willing or able to pay for any real damages, and Minnesota apparently has fairly strict wage garnishment laws, which would prevent us from recouping even legal costs for the foreseeable future. We did also look into suing the company that provided bartending services for the wedding, but ultimately dropped that as well, for two reasons. Firstly, there's a good chance that we'd lose the case and would then be out legal costs as well as medical expenses. And secondly, it seemed that even if we did win, someone who really wasn't to blame would likely be fired. There is good news though. As someone suggested on the original thread, the couple did have wedding insurance that covered up to $5,000 in expenses for injuries to guests, which did not require establishing fault. So we were actually able to get pretty much everything paid for with that, without going through the hassle of a lawsuit. It definitely wasn't the kind of payout that a personal injury suit can bring, but we hadn't really been looking to profit from the whole situation anyway, so it turned out fine. Other than the highly unpleasant individual who caused the whole situation, everyone involved has been really wonderful. My husband called the hospital's billing department, and they were very accommodating about deferring payment and reducing costs that they had control over. Intimate knowledge of the hospital's inner workings is one of the major perks of OI, along with the punch card that gets you your 10th surgery free. Also, the lawyer didn't end up charging us for anything, despite the fact that she spent 3 hours meeting with my husband and presumably some extra billable time on top of that. The bride and groom have also been very helpful with the insurance and legal information, and gracious about their wedding reception going south in such a spectacular manner. I do really wish that there had been some kind of consequences for the cousin beyond public shaming, but I'll just have to hope that every one of her Starbucks orders is slightly wrong for the rest of her life. Man, if I knew all it took to get Reddit Gold was a non-starter lawsuit and my husband breaking both his legs, I would have done this ages ago.